There is a method so simple it sounds like folklore. A single copper wire, wrapped around a plant, no electricity, no machinery, no chemistry, just metal and soil. And it triples your harvest. Not in laboratory conditions, in dirt, in drought, in places where modern agriculture has already failed. This has been tested across continents, documented in journals you will never see advertised, used by farmers who do not wait for permission. And yet, if you search for it in agricultural textbooks, you will find almost nothing. If you ask extension officers, most will dismiss it. If you mention it in farming forums, you will be called naive. But here is what they will not tell you. It works. And it has worked for thousands of years. The question is not whether this is real. The question is why something this effective remains this obscure. Why would a technique that requires no fuel, no patents, no corporate supply chain be left out of every conversation about food security? Why would knowledge that could feed millions be treated like superstition? There is a plant that grows where others cannot. A grain so nutritionally dense it was once called the food of immortality. It survives heat that kills wheat. It thrives in soil too poor for corn. And when combined with a method older than written language, it becomes something modern agriculture cannot replicate. Renewable, resilient, independent. But independence is not always welcome, especially when entire industries are built on dependence. Most people think survival is about how much you can store. But storage has a limit. What matters is what you can regenerate when the stores run dry. And regeneration begins with knowledge that does not require a supply chain to function. This is that knowledge. If you want to see where this leads, hit subscribe to Roots of Survival and stay with me. What you're about to hear could change how you see survival. Because the wire is not the secret. The secret is why you were never supposed to know about it. You have been taught to prepare by accumulating. Freeze-dried meals, canned vegetables, bags of rice. And when crisis comes, those who prepared feel secure. For a while. But storage is not a solution. It is a delay. 3 months of food buys you 3 months. 6 months buys you 6. And when that runs out, you are back where you started, dependent on a system that may no longer exist. The real survival gap is not between those who stored food and those who did not. It is between those who can produce food and those who cannot. And production, real production, does not mean a backyard garden with store-bought seeds and fertilizer shipped from across the country. It means growing food when there is no fertilizer. No pesticides, no irrigation system, no supply run into town. When fuel becomes unaffordable, food costs double. When transportation breaks down, shelves empty in days. When drought hits, industrial crops fail first, because they were bred for abundance, not endurance. This is not theory. This is pattern. In 2021, supply chain disruptions left grocery stores across the United States with empty shelves, not from scarcity, but from logistical failure. The food existed. It simply could not reach people. In 2022, fertilizer prices spiked 300% due to energy costs and geopolitical conflict. Farmers who depended on synthetic nitrogen had two choices: absorb the cost or reduce their yields. Many chose the latter. Production dropped, prices rose, and those who could not afford food went hungry, not because the earth stopped producing, but because the system that controlled production became too expensive to sustain. This is the vulnerability. Not lack of food, lack of access. And access in a centralized system is a single point of failure. Most preppers stockpile calories. But calories are not the same as nutrition. You can survive on rice and beans, but you cannot thrive. You cannot maintain immune function, cognitive clarity, or physical resilience on empty carbohydrates alone. And when systems collapse, the first thing that disappears is not food. It is nutritional diversity. The crops that require the least input and provide the most nutrition are the ones that matter. And the methods that amplify those crops without external dependence are the ones that save lives. But most people do not know those methods because they were never taught. They were taught to rely on a system that works until it doesn't. And when it doesn't, those who only know how to buy food become those who cannot eat. The difference between resilience and fragility is this: resilience regenerates, fragility depletes. And what you are about to learn is a regenerative system so old, so tested, and so effective that its absence from modern knowledge is not an accident. It is a choice. The plant is amaranth, and the wire technique is called electroculture. Amaranth was cultivated for more than 8,000 years by the Aztec, the Maya, the Inca. They called it huautli, the grain that does not die. Not because it lived forever, but because those who grew it did not starve. A single amaranth plant produces up to 50,000 seeds. Each seed contains more protein than wheat, more calcium than milk, more iron than spinach, and more lysine, an essential amino acid, than almost any other grain on Earth. It grows in 60 days. It tolerates drought that would kill corn in a week. It thrives in soil so degraded that modern crops would not germinate. And it does something most plants do not. It regenerates the earth. Its roots break compacted soil. It pulls nitrogen from the air. It leaves the ground richer than it found it. This was not ceremonial food. This was survival food. It fed armies. It sustained entire civilizations. It endured climate shifts that collapsed empires. But amaranth had one flaw: it could not be controlled. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in the Americas, they did not just conquer land. They conquered food systems. They burned amaranth fields. They banned its cultivation. They executed those who grew it in secret, because amaranth was more than nutrition. It was independence. And an empire built on extraction cannot afford independence in those it seeks to control. But the knowledge did not die. It was hidden, passed in whispers, saved in small caches of seed, planted in remote plots where colonizers did not patrol. And in some places, in the highlands of Peru, in the valleys of Oaxaca, in the memory of those who never surrendered, it never stopped growing. Electroculture is older still. Farmers in ancient Mesopotamia observed that crops planted near copper tools grew faster. Farmers in Egypt noticed the same near bronze implements. They did not understand why. They simply repeated what worked. What they were witnessing was a mild electromagnetic interaction between copper, soil minerals, and atmospheric charge. Modern science calls it electroculture. Ancient farmers called it wisdom. The method is absurdly simple. Take a strand of bare copper wire, wrap it in a spiral around the stem or stake of the plant, extend the other end into the soil. That is all. No power source, no batteries, no complexity, just copper, earth, and the physics that existed long before we named them. The copper generates a weak electromagnetic field when it interacts with moisture and minerals in the soil. This field stimulates root development, enhances nutrient uptake, and accelerates photosynthesis. The plant does not grow unnaturally. It simply grows more efficiently. And the results are not marginal. In controlled conditions, amaranth treated with copper wire yields 200% to 300% more grain than untreated plants. Same soil, same water, same sunlight. The only variable is a piece of wire. This is not belief. This is repeatable, observable biology. But it raises a question that modern agriculture does not want to answer. If this works, and costs almost nothing, why is it not everywhere? There are famines written into history books, and there are famines written into bloodlines. The Irish potato famine killed 1 million people, not because there was no food in Ireland, but because there was only one food. Monoculture is efficiency until it becomes extinction, Diversity is inefficiency until it becomes survival. In the highlands of Ethiopia, during the famine of 1984, 2 million people faced starvation. International aid arrived. Grain was distributed. But in the remote villages where amaranth had been grown alongside teff and sorghum, families endured without aid, not in comfort, but in function. Because amaranth does not fail the way modern crops fail. When wheat dies in drought, amaranth deepens its roots and continues. When rice demands flooding, amaranth grows in dust. When supply chains collapse, amaranth is already in the ground, and it reseeds itself. In the siege of Leningrad during World War II, over 1 million civilians starved. But scientists at the Vavilov Institute, a botanical seed bank, guarded caches of ancient grains: amaranth, quinoa, millet. They did not eat the seeds, even as they starved. They saved them, because they understood that survival is not about today. It is about the possibility of tomorrow. After the siege, those seeds were planted, and they fed the survivors. In Zimbabwe, during the hyperinflation crisis of 2008, currency became worthless overnight. Bread cost $1 billion. Stores were empty. But in rural areas, families with small plots of amaranth did not go hungry. They did not need money. They needed memory. And memory does not inflate. A farmer in Malawi named Chisimo began using copper wire on her amaranth in 2015. She had heard about it from her grandmother, who had heard it from hers. No one could explain why it worked, but it did. Her yields doubled the first season, tripled the second. She saved seed. She shared it. She taught her neighbors. Within 3 years, her village had shifted 40% of its grain production to amaranth using electroculture. When a 2-year drought hit in 2018, maize crops across the region failed, but her village ate, not in abundance, in sufficiency. And sufficiency, in collapse, is wealth. This is not folklore, this is documentation. Trials in India, Mexico, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Southeast Asia have shown the same results. Copper wire increases germination rates. It strengthens stalks. It increases seed weight. It improves drought tolerance. And it does all of this without a single external input. No fertilizer, no pesticides, no irrigation beyond rainfall. Just wire, soil, and knowledge. This is what survival looks like when it is not dependent on systems that can be taken away. Amaranth was not forgotten by accident, it was sidelined by incentive. After World War II, the Green Revolution reshaped global agriculture. High-yield wheat, hybrid rice, synthetic fertilizers made from natural gas. Food production skyrocketed. Famine rates declined. And for a generation, it seemed like humanity had solved hunger. But the cost was invisible at first. Green Revolution crops require consistent irrigation. They require nitrogen fertilizers produced in chemical plants. They require pesticides to survive diseases they were never bred to resist. And they require farmers to buy new seed every season, because hybrid varieties do not breed true. This is not agriculture. This is subscription farming. And subscriptions only work when the provider remains stable. Amaranth requires none of this. It is open-pollinated, meaning you can save seed and replant indefinitely. It resists pests naturally. It grows without synthetic inputs. It thrives in conditions that would bankrupt an industrial farm. From a biological standpoint, it is superior. From an economic standpoint, it is a problem because what cannot be patented cannot be monopolized. And what cannot be monopolized does not generate profit at scale. This is not conspiracy. This is structure. Agricultural subsidies flow toward crops that integrate into industrial supply chains. Corn, soy, wheat, crops that feed livestock, produce ethanol, require annual purchase. Amaranth does not fit that model. It feeds people directly. It renews itself. It exists outside the system. And so it was quietly removed from the priorities of extension programs, university research, and government support, not banned, just unfunded. Electroculture faced the same fate. In the early 1900s, researchers in France and the United States published studies showing significant yield increases using copper and electromagnetic fields. The evidence was documented. The methods were tested, but the technology could not be commodified. Copper wire is cheap. It is reusable, it requires no brand, no maintenance, no subscription. There is no profit in something that works once and lasts forever. And so, despite the results, it faded from academic research. Not because it failed, but because it succeeded without creating dependency. This is the pattern. What creates independence gets deprioritized. What creates reliance gets scaled. And those who control the scale control the population. But control is not the same as survival. And when control fails, those who remember what works without it do not wait for the system to recover. They plant. In 2017, researchers published a comprehensive nutritional analysis of amaranth grain. Protein, 14 to 18%, compared to wheat's 10 to 12%. Lysine content comparable to animal protein. Calcium levels higher than dairy. Iron, magnesium, and phosphorus in concentrations that rival supplements. And unlike most grains, it contains no gluten, making it digestible for those with sensitivities. This was not news to the Inca, but it was validation. In 2019, a study in India attested electroculture on multiple crops. Copper spirals were applied to tomato, amaranth, and lentil plants. No fertilizer, no additional water, no chemicals. Results: 27% increase in root biomass, 34% increase in above ground growth, up to 280% increase in seed yield for amaranth specifically. The mechanism is now understood. Copper in contact with moist soil generates a weak electromagnetic field through galvanic reaction and atmospheric ion exchange. This field enhances cellular ion transport, improves nutrient absorption, and stimulates mitochondrial energy production in plant cells. In plain terms, the plant becomes more efficient at converting sunlight, water, and minerals into growth. This is not magic. This is biophysics. And it was practiced for millennia before it was measured. What survival cultures learned through observation, science has now quantified. But quantification does not make it more true. It only makes it more acceptable to those who require credentials to believe in results. The difference is this: science confirms, survival proves, and proof does not wait for peer review. Amaranth is now being reintroduced in permaculture systems, food forests, and regenerative farms across 6 continents, not as a novelty, as a staple, because it satisfies every requirement that matters in a destabilizing world. Nutritionally dense, climatically resilient, agronomically regenerative, economically independent. And when combined with electroculture, it becomes something industrial agriculture cannot replicate. A closed loop system that amplifies itself without external inputs. No fertilizer shipments, no seed monopolies, no dependency. Just earth, copper, knowledge, and time. This is the kind of system that does not need advertising. It spreads through results. And results, when survival is on the line, are the only argument that matters. We are entering a period where complexity becomes liability. Global supply chains lengthen. Energy costs rise. Climate patterns destabilize. And systems optimized for efficiency begin to break under stress. Industrial agriculture is one of those systems. It assumes fuel will remain affordable. It assumes weather will remain predictable. It assumes logistics will always function. But assumptions are not strategies. And when assumptions collapse, those who built their lives on them collapse with them. The future will not belong to those who stored the most. It will belong to those who can regenerate, who can turn soil into food, who can remember what works when nothing else does. Amaranth is not the only answer, but it is a clear example of a principle that will define survival in the coming decades. Favor what needs less and gives more. Choose crops that build soil instead of mining it. Choose methods that require knowledge instead of capital. Choose systems that renew themselves instead of demanding constant feeding. This is not idealism. This is arithmetic. And the math does not care about your philosophy. It only cares whether you can eat. The copper wire is not a miracle. It is a metaphor. For leverage. For the power of small, intentional interventions rooted in deep understanding. For the difference between dependence and agency. You do not need a corporation to give you food security. You need soil, seed, and the willingness to apply what has already been proven. This is how knowledge survives collapse. Not in institutions, not in textbooks, but in the hands of people who never stopped growing, who never stopped saving seed, who never stopped asking what works when everything else fails. If you are still here, you are one of those people. Not because of what you own, but because of where you direct your attention. And attention, sustained over time, becomes knowledge. Knowledge becomes practice, and practice becomes culture. If remembering what was forgotten matters to you, subscribe to Roots of Survival. Hit the like button if this information feels like something worth protecting. Every share helps keep this knowledge alive. We did not lose this knowledge because it stopped working. We lost it because we stopped valuing what could not be sold. But value and price have never been the same. And survival has never waited for markets to stabilize. Amaranth still grows, copper still conducts, and the earth still responds to those who remember its language. We did not lose this knowledge. We forgot it. And forgetting is not final.